Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to have everybody here tonight. Thank you, Amber, Trish, and Janice for joining us as our homeschoolers and generously giving your time to, to help all of us understand a little bit better about how everybody can do better for homeschooling, including me at the library. Before we begin, I want to introduce Julia Von Ranson, who's our new youth services librarian here at Putney Library. The position of youth services librarian is brand new to Putney. I don't believe there's ever been one, though we've had Susan Hesse doing great volunteer stuff and me and her doing summer reading program together. I'm really excited to have Julie on board to have more attention towards this. There's so many kids and families in Putney, and right now seems like an especially vital time to be supporting kids and families in whatever their new schooling reality is. And in that spirit, Julia's put together a really awesome directory of homeschooling resources that's available on our website. I'll put the link in the chat in just a second. And it's everything from the language learning resources you can access with your library card to really fun, silly dance videos that you can take, both kids and adults can take movement breaks with. So I'll share that. It's really great. And I believe Amber has something like that to share with us as well. The idea for this panel came up when Amber and I were talking a little bit in advance of the school year about how many parents were approaching us, just talking about the anxiety of the new school reality, whether your kids are in regular school, or you have decided to have them do full-time homeschooling, whether that's remote or supported by you in a curriculum, or whether they're unschooling. Everybody's school year looks completely different this year. And I know there's just a lot of need out there. And we thought that this would be a great way to kind of get some knowledgeable folks together to advise us on that. So I'm really glad that you're all here for that, and that we're recording it so we can refer other folks to it in the future. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Amber and have her introduce everybody. Thanks so much.
Hi everybody, I'm Amber Paris. Emily already covered. I'm a library board member in addition to being a local homeschooling mom. So that's sort of, I don't know if that's where the conversation stemmed from, but it felt like more and more people were seeking advice from homeschoolers on how to navigate like the different learning situation they were finding themselves in this year. So I live here in Putney. I have 3 kids. If they were in school, they would be in 9th grade, 6th grade, and 1st grade. We've always homeschooled, and I'll talk more about it later, but I was thinking about where we would fall in our homeschooling style. When my kids were younger, we definitely were at the pretty far end of the unschooling spectrum. You know, things were pretty freeform and unstructured. And as my older 2 have gotten older, you know, we've shifted a little bit on that continuum a little bit. And so now I really see us, when people ask, I say that we're interest-led homeschoolers. So, you know, that basically just means that I take whatever they're really like into at any given moment, and I just sort of build on that and try to cover as many things as feel important with that area of interest. Yeah, that feels like all for me for right now. Do you want to go next, Janice?
Sure. My name's Janice Larry Jones. I live in Westminster. We've been homeschooling now since my oldest was in 2nd grade, and he's now in 9th grade. So I have 3 children, and we all do the homeschooling thing together. My oldest, I just mentioned, he's in 9th grade. My middle daughter, it just started 6th grade, and then my youngest, he's in preschool. So there's quite a range of ages and needs that we address every day. And similar to Amber, we in the past had done more project-based learning, integrating all areas of curriculum through taking on projects and doing them together. But now, as Christopher has entered high school, we're really wanting to check all those boxes so that he's all set if he chooses to go to college. So that's more the trajectory that we're seriously transitioning to. And we've been transitioning to that over the last few years, introducing more structured curriculum over the last few years for sure. But always for us in the beginning was reading, writing, and arithmetic were have-tos in our day, and then the rest of the day was filled with, as I was mentioning previously, project-based learning.
Thanks, Janice. All right, Trish, you're up.
Okay. I'm Trish Roberts, and I also live in Westminster, right on the Putney line. And I have 2 children. My oldest is 10, so he would be in 5th grade. And my second oldest is 8. She would be in 3rd grade. And other than a brief stint for my oldest, Charlie, when he was 3, he went to preschool a couple mornings a week. Other than that, they've been home with me and we've been homeschooling. I lived in Connecticut for some of that, and I've been up in Vermont here. I think it's been 4 years now. And yeah, I think that for us, I think a lot of what Amber and Janice said, I sort of maybe a little like mix of the 2 of them, but definitely interest led. And as they were, I feel like we're transitioning now given their ages, but just super play based learning, letting their interests kind of lead their play. And as they become curious about whatever it is that they are interested in, supporting them in that through different activities, projects, books, whatever resources I felt applied. But a big part of their lives so far has just been kind of being in their world, whatever that world looked like, and absorbing that world around them through their play and other activities. I'd say when they were little, I was very Waldorf based, the Waldorf philosophy. And then as they've gotten older, we're definitely kind of doing more of your standard curriculum stuff is starting to be put into our day more and more.
Thanks, Trish. Yeah, so I feel like Emily already introduced how this came about pretty well. You know, we were sort of like, what do parents need? Or Emily said, you know, I'm trying to figure out what parents need. And I was like, well, I can tell you that I'm fielding a lot of questions. I was in the thick of just people who were just looking for information about how we navigate our days and our years, how we do this, how do we balance homeschooling multiple ages of children, how do we balance like homeschooling and maybe working, do we use a curriculum? That's probably like the #1 question that I answer. And then when I say that we don't use a curriculum, well, what do we do? Like what do our days look like? And then how do you do this legally in the state of Vermont? Like, what does it look like to be in compliance with what Vermont asks of homeschoolers in the state? So Emily had put a call out for questions ahead of all of this, and I think there was only one that sort of trickled in through Facebook, which I saw. And so we thought that the format for tonight could sort of, we could have these major topic areas that I just talked about, and we could just start a conversation between the 3 of us about how we would go about addressing each of those topic areas. And if anybody has questions, like at any point, like Emily said, you can put them in the chat box, and at the end, like we can, you know, just open it up for questions. I think that this is like, I see tonight as being much more about like the practicalities of homeschooling and less about learning philosophy. I think that that's like a whole other can of worms. That could be like its own panel all by itself for hours. And yeah, I think everybody was here when I mentioned that quote. Like, there really are so many different ways to homeschool. So like whatever you hear from us tonight, I tapped Janice and Trish just because I know them well. I felt like they would be dependable, they would show up, I know they would be articulate. We have a lot of commonalities between the three of us, so you might hear a lot of the same thing. But we also have some things that we approach differently. And
For sure.
the idea tonight was that if it seemed like there were specific questions that were just coming up again and again, that there could be future panels down the road and we could have more targeted panelists. So if we had people who were asking a lot of questions about, I have an only child, how on earth do I entertain like an only child, then like I could tap somebody I know who homeschools an only child. So what you hear tonight is really just like what our experience is and what has worked for us or not worked for us. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for other people, but hopefully it will help ease some of the anxiety about transitioning to a different learning environment. So with all that being said, I thought that maybe it would be best to start out with like the different styles of homeschooling and whether we use curriculums and what that looks like how do we craft our children's learning experience. Should I just tag one of you to go first this time? Do one of you feel really called to go first?
I can go, sure.
Okay.
The question is, do we use a curriculum or not, and just what that looks like?
Yeah, if not, like how do you, if you do anything, what does it look like?
No, I don't really use a curriculum. When Charlie was younger, I did try a Waldorf-based curriculum when he was 7. That didn't really work for him, and I think that's been one of the things that I really try to hold on to as a homeschooler is that not everything works for everybody, and even between your children. So we tried something, it didn't work for him. That's okay. We are doing other things. So I think that I've always kind of based our days off of some sort of rhythm, and that's constantly changing, and it's usually changing by the season because a lot of our learning is really nature-based, and I like to be connected to the natural world and the changing seasons like that. And I've also found that for my kids, at least, to approach the day, them kind of knowing, even if they don't know exactly what they're doing, because we might not have the most structured day in the terms of a typical schedule, like, 8 o'clock we do this, 9 o'clock we do this. But in general, on Tuesday mornings, this is what we do. And on this day, we go to the library. And this day, we're going to go out into the forest and spend time exploring the woods, or this day we get to play with this friend. And so whatever that rhythm looks like, and sometimes I sort of create a skeleton and then kind of have their input. And as they're getting older and older, their input is more and more important. And to have that sort of regularity of that rhythm, and it doesn't mean we have to stick to it, but especially if they're getting engaged into something that I think is more valuable than what I set forth, and to have that flexibility. So I think for us, it's about having different inputs that they get to find different books. I find different books for them. We do a lot of reading together. And then so certain things will stick. And if something sticks, then I do my best to see how deep we can go into whatever topic that is. And I will say too, that I think a lot of our learning up to this point has been, as Amber says this a lot, I think for her family, is life learning. So whether it's baking cookies or gardening or anything you're doing around the house, is a part of their learning. I think this year, so Charlie would be in 5th grade, and I did get my hands on the Oak Meadow curriculum. I think he's sort of transitioning, and I can feel it in him. And so it was one of those things that I really wanted to have the buy-in from him. And so I read some samples of the curriculum to him and said, hey, does this sound cool to you? Do you want to try this? Do you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. So we started to dabble in that a bit, which has been fun. And for me, my children are only 2 years apart, and the types of learners they're not even 2 years apart in terms of kind of where they are with sort of typical milestones of learning with reading in particular, reading and writing. And so a lot of the stuff we do together, and I might not ask or expect Lila, my 8-year-old, to do what Charlie might be expected to do, but she's usually along there reading with us and doing all the stuff that Charlie's doing too. But we are starting to do things differently. Like Lila asked to learn French this year, and Charlie has no interest in that. And I was a French teacher before being a homeschooling mom. So that's been fun to have that little time with her and being able to set up Charlie with something on his own. So that's always a balance of the times that it's always the 3 of us doing stuff together versus when it's better for everybody, for them to have that sort of one-on-one time dedicated to them. How does that sound, Amber, as a start?
Yeah, that sounded great. Thank you. I'll let you go next, Janice.
Okay. Yeah. So for us, we begin every year with a family meeting where the 5 of us sit down and we discuss what are our learning goals for the year. What is it that we want to accomplish? What are the have-tos that I want to see accomplished? And what are your interests and what do you want to learn about this year? And so from my perspective, the have-tos are you need to take some sort of instrument or do some, even if it's you're using your voice as your instrument, something in the music arena. You have to do something physical. There has to be some sort of physical activity planned into the week, be it rock climbing or wilderness school or soccer or baseball, whatever it is, that is a component. We need to do, when they were younger, we need to do phonics. You have to have that be a part of your week. You must do some arithmetic. You need to get that covered too, and we need to be doing writing. So there would be those have-tos, but then there were also, well, what is it that you want to learn this year? What are you really inspired by? My eldest, Christopher, he is incredibly inspired by baking. So much so that he's now at the point where he's gone to classes at King Arthur because he's that, not now obviously, but he's that into baking. So we, for their interest areas, if it's something that I'm not an expert in, I'm looking at the community to discover how I can then augment our at-home curriculum with opportunities for them out and about. My daughter plays fiddle. I do not play fiddle. So we have accessed somebody within the community to help out with her fiddle instruction. Something else that my daughter has done is she's quite into acting. So she's gone out and taken acting classes. So it's kind of like looking at what can you learn from, what's available out there, accessing the community for that. But then also, once they got into the older grades, we have always sort of followed a Waldorf ebb and flow, in that right now my daughter's at the age where ancient civilizations is what we're studying. And so for when we do that type of learning, it's a lot of research on my behalf and accessing lots of books from the library. Thank you, Emily. And kind of putting some things together, but then doing project-based learning with that as well. so while we don't follow a specific curriculum, I do have the general state guidelines for what the curriculum is for each grade level as a touchstone. So I know, okay, they, at this point in fourth grade, you know, it would be great if they could. And it's not that I'm necessarily holding my child to that. I'm working with them at the level that they're at, absolutely. But I do have in the back of my mind, okay, yes, I know this is where they should be. Either they're below this or they're above this, but you know, that we do have these specific skills that we know that we need to continue to work on. Yeah. And so I was kind of joking earlier about we're in a special education zone over here where, you know, you're just meeting the child where they're at. You know what the curriculum is, but you're meeting them where they're at and you're bringing them what they need based on where they're at and where the curriculum is. You're meeting them. You're the bridge.
That's awesome, Janice. Thanks. I'm going to piggyback off of that. I feel like something that I used, like a metaphor I used to describe at one point to a family who was kind of freaking out about like schools shutting down many, many months ago, was that I don't necessarily feel like I do anything all that special. You know, like I build bridges for my kids and I like clear pathways for them and try to remove obstacles when I see them like, you know, having specific interests. We don't use a curriculum, though we sometimes pull piecemeal from curriculums. In the past, like we've definitely used pieces of Oak Meadow for math or for ancient civilizations. We've found over the years that crafting small learning groups is incredibly helpful. So, you know, typically it's a few similar aged children and you're choosing a topic, or more often now they're choosing a topic for the year. And then the parents get to share the load of teaching among themselves. And the kids get to be with peers when they're learning, which is always fun. In my experience, they always really look forward to these experiences. I would also echo, my family also, like we usually sometime in the summer, we sit down and we say, hey, like what are your goals this year? What do you wish to be doing with yourself this year? And what does that look like? And then on a weekly basis, just sort of putting up there like, hey, like what do you feel like you need to get done this week? And that looks a lot different for my child who's in high school this year, and my child who is middle school, and my child who's elementary school. And there's definitely different expectations. But I really operate from a level of trust. I would say that I really feel like if I am continuing to foster a love of learning in them, that they're going to be able to learn whatever they want to learn when they're ready to learn it. I also loved that, I would have completely forgotten about this, Janice, but I love the piece about reaching out and really like relying on your community. I feel like it's so important. About 2 years ago, when my high schooler was then 11 or 12, she just like fell headfirst into poetry. She loved poetry. She couldn't get enough poetry. And so I started looking around, like, what could I like provide for her? And I wasn't finding a whole lot. And so I started reaching out to local poets, like, hey, would you be into like teaching a class, even if you only had 3 kids in your class? Like, how much would you want to make? Or, hey, would you be interested in just like mentoring and reading like what she's writing and like giving her feedback? And you know, just over 2 years, like she has this whole network of mentors now that she can rely on and that have helped her grow that specific skill that she felt was really important. So that's an example of her like having a passion that she really wanted to run with. And on my end, like I found a math book that was used poetry. Like I feel like I started looking for all these resources that we could like sort of hit other subjects. Like, okay, what could we teach through poetry? So that's always really nice. I guess I would also say that this maybe will hit later too, but I have definitely two very different learners. I have a high schooler who's incredibly self-directed. I have to give her very little instruction on, like, she's really good at staying on task all by herself. And then I have a middle schooler who it's like pulling teeth to get him to do even like the things that he's agreed that he wants to do. So I think that, you know, I can say like, oh, this is the way we homeschool, but really if I look at our day, like we homeschool in like almost 3 different ways on any given day because we have like these 3 different learners in our house. I'm trying to think of what else I want to say about like curriculum or like following standards. I think too, like I don't know what the ages of the people who are going to watch this at some point are, the people who are participating tonight. I really feel like my kids were all really late readers, right? And so that required like a massive level of trust on my part that they were going to learn how to read if they were growing up in this literate household where they were surrounded by books, they were being read to all the time. They clearly loved looking at books, but that I had to trust like, it's okay if, you know, my 6, 7, 8, like sometimes 9-year-old isn't reading yet, like it's going to come. And it did come, you know, for the 2 oldest ones. The little one is still working on it. We've experienced that in our life with math. I have a really math adverse child who got to the point where she recognized that she didn't feel comfortable with how behind she was in math, and so chose for me to find a tutor for her, and got up to grade level within a couple of months because she had the motivation to do that work. I think like I could have fought with her for years trying to do that level of work and wouldn't have gotten as far because she wouldn't have been ready to do that yet. What else? Oh, I guess the other piece I would say, just going back to the idea of the learning goals, is that I'm asking them to set goals, but I'm also just, there aren't consequences in our house if they're not meeting their goals on a weekly basis. Like I sort of see it being, the consequence is that they're not meeting their expectations. Like it's not necessarily up to me to be, you know, putting a consequence or a punishment on that piece. Yeah, I think that that's all I have on that. Do people have questions about like the curriculum versus non-curriculum idea of things yet? I guess one more thing I would just want to add really quickly. I was thinking about this earlier, just from the perspective of somebody. I mean, I think it's important to look at like what's going to work for your kids, but I was thinking about the amount of work that parents have to do. And if you're unschooling, there's not a whole lot of prep work. And if you're using a boxed curriculum, it's all there for you. If you're doing what you just heard, like Janice and Trish and I say we're doing, it does require a lot of like behind the scenes, like orchestration. Like you're kind of like, you're seeking mentors, you're like looking at all the books and all the libraries in the area, you know, it's definitely more legwork than other styles of homeschooling, at least in the early years. Like once you have kids that get to high school level, they're able to seek resources on their own, I find pretty easily. But if your kids are like, you know, middle school, elementary school, I think it's definitely a little bit more work to navigate like that style. Yeah, so if there aren't any questions popping up in chat right now, about like the curriculum stuff, I was kind of thinking we could segue into what it looks like to homeschool a range of ages at the same time, which I know Trish already hit on a little bit. And I can't remember if, I don't know that you did, Janice. So maybe I'll let you start with talking about, because you have, like me, you have a very wide spectrum of ages in your house?
Yeah, that is a challenge at times, I'll be honest. In that, the high schooler is now at the point where he's got some serious learning he wants to do, and the newly 6-year-old wants to play and be active. So there is some, creative navigating as to how to allow both of those things to happen. I mean, I guess it's not fair me making that statement right now in some ways, because it's just the beginning of the school year. And so, of course, there's that natural, like, everybody trying to find their spot and rhythm and, kind of coming together. And a month from now, I might not have the same answer as I have in this moment, because this is what I'm living right now. But yeah, I guess I just find, as long as I am tuning into the youngest's needs and planning for that, then the older one is able to navigate what he has to navigate through more easily. But as far as multi-age in relation to curriculum, that's a whole nother topic. And I think with the project-based learning that we do, it does mean that I'm researching lots of different topics all at the same time. But I've signed up to be a lifelong learner. It's part of what I'm inspired by in life. So for me, it's an approach that really works well with my personality, in that I do want to learn all about ancient Egypt. I did not learn enough the first time around. I'm very interested in learning more. And then bringing, fun activities to them that then they can explore ancient Egypt and learn a lot more about it. So yes, it is a lot of research as far as, this one's interested in this, or this one's studying this, and kind of making sure that there are enough resources and for them to delve into and really enjoy the topic. But if you streamline it, sometimes it can get easier. For example, something that we've done in our home is we've chosen to study like one country a month. And we'll learn about the country's history, we'll learn about their cuisine, their culture, and all of those sorts of things. And that's something that we're all working on together. So that's one way that I've kind of learned to streamline, is kind of taking one topic and, delving into it all together. That's been helpful. And it also brings the three of them together. And we talk about it at lunch, we talk about it at dinner, we're able to share with Mimi and Papa great facts about Mexico or something, and everyone's able to participate in the conversation. So that's been something really fantastic that we've been able to do. And one year, it's not this year, but one year we had a writing project where we were writing letters to different folks. They would pick one person a week to write a letter to. And that gave them something common to focus in on. So I think, yes, they'll have their different activities, but then also finding things that they can all do really kind of brings it together as well, and creates, a family classroom, essentially.
We also have a question in the chat from Aileen. She says, our kids are 10 and 13 in 6th and 8th grades, and they attend PCS. We're doing the remote hybrid model right now, which means they have 3 days of remote learning. We're looking to give structure to the 3 remote days. Projects to complete might be useful. Do you have any resources that we can use to supplement?
I just remember the title of the book. It's I think it's called 101 Homeschooling Ideas, something. I bet if you just Googled that, it would pop up. Yeah. But there's a lot of fun project-based learning in that book, by subject even, organized by subject. And Amber, you were mentioning one too, right?
Well, I started, so Eileen, if you're in the chat, further up in the chat near the beginning, I shared a link to a Google Doc where I had put some resources, admittedly kind of last minute. I was just kind of looking at my bookshelf and sort of glancing through like my bookmarks on the computer, different resources that we've found helpful over the years. They're not all free. Some of them are subscription based. Some of them like you just pay by the product, and some of them are free. So it's kind of across the board in that way. And then the books are really probably more at the learning philosophy end of the spectrum right now, but there are definitely more titles that probably all three of us could add that would look more like the project-based homeschooling book, where it's really like, it's giving you a little bit of a map for how to use like a certain style to structure your day. I am not the person to answer questions about daily rhythm because I aspire to daily rhythm, but I never achieve it. So maybe Trish has some input about like how to, because you're a little bit more, I feel like you're better at that container of rhythm, for how to structure those days at home.
Yeah, can I get a little clarity from the question in the chat? So the days they have virtual learning on these days, that happens at certain times, or is it very open that like you get to log in?
Hi. So so we don't homeschool. I admire everybody who is able to do that, and we don't, mostly because we work, but also because I found out when my kids were little that I am not a teacher. So so they attend PCS right now. They have a daily schedule, or they used to have a daily schedule. We hopefully eventually will go back to some kind of daily schedule, and we don't want to lose that rhythm. So we're looking to supplement those days in a fairly rigid way so that when they do go back to school, they're not shocked by that. And the other piece, of course, is that both my husband and I work, and we can't spend a lot of time. We're just looking for ideas and ways to structure the day on the days that they're off, so that when we do go back to school,
I see.
Everybody's on board.
Yeah, I think I'm understanding your question a little bit better now. I kind of mentioned this maybe at the way at the beginning when I introduced myself. So sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I think this is might answer your question. I think on the days off, if especially given their ages, you know, being able to sit down with them and discuss like how they want to spend that time and creating a rhythm based upon their interests and your expectations given work schedules and hey, we need to spend this amount of time outside or this amount of time having physical activity, or you know, these have to be quiet hours because you know I'm on the phone for work. But taking everybody's schedules into everyone's needs in the house. I know that's something we struggle with here. My husband works from home and sometimes he's on phone calls, and there's a lot of communication that needs to happen of like, we need to be absolutely quiet, you know, or out of the house for this time. And so just taking in their interests and your needs as a family, and as the parent, like kind of the expectations that you have of them. And I guess what I've had success with is actually like putting this on the refrigerator, like a fun schedule that they create for themselves or that you create as a family. Like these are our, you know, these are our days off, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we're not in school. And in general, like this is my personal time where I have to be quiet and self-motivated and reading, or I need to be outdoors doing this, or you know, on this day we're going to pick up books from the library, and then, you know, engage in some sort of projects. I don't know if that's really answering the question, but I guess I just feel like at those ages, they're old enough where they can say like, hey, like, given this free time I have, this is what I want to do. And then from the parent perspective saying, okay, that's great. Like, this is how we can fit it in given our schedules, or this is how we can make it work, that we're all like really communicating really clearly. I think COVID has definitely taught our family like to really, really communicate on a deeper level in terms of what we need, all sharing this space together at different times. Eileen, does that help at all, or do you have a follow-up question that can help maybe answer a little bit better?
So I guess we came up with our own schedules when we first went full remote in March. So we've come up with a preliminary schedule. I guess I'm more looking for supplemental projects that we can give to them, because they tend to finish their work on Wednesday and then have 2 days quote unquote free, and that's not the intention of the 5-day school day,
right?
School week.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't really have a whole lot of experience with this particular learning format, but I guess I would. I don't think anybody does. I know, but I guess we're making it up as we go, right? I guess if I were in that position, I would maybe on that Wednesday, you know, have time gathering as a family and saying, hey, like, is there anything that you're learning about this week that you're really into? And let's take, you know, that hour on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday night, 2 hours. Let's look online. Let's find some resources. Let's make Wednesday afternoon going to the library because it's now open, and getting out some books, or emailing Emily for some books, so that, you know, that Thursday, Friday is sort of like extension activities, right, from whatever they're learning, but only about, you know, what they're really, really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo what Trish is saying, like, you know, 6th and 8th grade. So they're probably like into some pretty serious, like, you know, history or social studies projects. And maybe there's something that like can be jumped off of there where you can utilize, like, okay, we're already learning, like, maybe it's US history. Like, what is there out there that we could build on with that they can maybe accomplish on their own without too much input from you? Because I think I'm hearing that you're working while they're doing the home, like the learning at home. And if there's nothing like they're super into within what they're already learning via school, like, what are their passions and how can those be organized into productive time when you're trying to work and they're supposed to be learning? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, they already have extracurricular activities that they have started back up, fortunately. You know, what was supposed to be after school. It just seems to me that their time, we've been trying to do that kind of thing, but none of us are used to not having that kind of structure. So we can suggest certain paths to occupy their days, but I don't feel like it's really working in a educational standpoint, because they're left to their own devices for times that you know, I wish I could be there, but I'm not. So
I think and this isn't a solution, this is more of just like support in the idea that from almost everyone, my children have always homeschooled, but I feel like I've talked to enough people who've transitioned out of the school system, and I know this isn't exactly what's happening for you, but who've transitioned out of the school system, and those kids have a hard time making that transition because they're used to being told like what to do with all of their time when they're supposed to be in a learning environment. So it can be really challenging for them to know how to organize their days, and it can be really frustrating from a parent's point of view to sort of be like, oh, you're still just like laying around or wanting to play your video game or whatever it is that you know, you're seeing them doing on these days.
Mhm.
And I feel like I definitely go through different phases with that. I go through phases of irritation where I'll like needle them a little bit and be like, hey, I've seen you laying on the couch, like, you know, reading books for 3 hours, which is awesome, but like maybe it's time to go outside and be physical for a while. And I go through phases where I just let them, I let them get bored. Like I let them get bored to tears until like they finally have to fill their time with something productive. Which is sometimes really painful for me because I want to just like put something in front of them and tell them to just do it. Um, um, I think like, oh, something Trish and I talked about the other day that maybe would be helpful too. So maybe you know this idea from when your kids were younger, but there's this idea called strewing. So the idea of strewing is that like, I don't know, like a lot of kids, like you tell them to do something or you say, hey, I think this might be cool. And like the immediate impulse is just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But if you sort of just like plant things around the house that are potentially interesting and they stumble across them themselves and they're like, oh, that looks cool. Like, you know, rubber band engineering book with like some rubber bands placed close by. You know, maybe that is a way in to organize their time a little more productively and subtly without it. I don't know if that's an issue for you, if that's something you're coming up against, where it's like you're trying to make, I hear maybe you saying you're trying to make suggestions for how to organize their time, but it feels like they're not necessarily going along with it.
I guess it's more that that they're finishing up what the school is giving them before the time is allotted. So um, maybe I don't need to worry about that, but we do.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
looking to find
So,
supplements to do that kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, I think if you want to supplement, that makes a lot of sense. And if they're buying into it, fantastic. But I mean, having taught in the public schools for 13 years, I can tell you that they're set up in a way where some children do finish very early and a lot of their time is wasted. But they're in that building for 6 hours a day and you don't see that up close and personal. Um, and you know, other children in that same room really struggle and they never finish it in the allotted amount of time. The way that our school systems are structured, it's to meet the middle. And yes, I think some school systems do a better job of others of trying to address that issue. But I mean, I was witness to it for 13 years, so there is always just that.
No, we've seen that as just the normal school day. It just seems to be exacerbated right now.
Right.
Right. And so,
I mean,
given the fact that we aren't teachers and we do work, we're looking for we're we're looking to you to find. I guess we're looking for curricula. That's what we're looking for.
so Eileen, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have some technical issues. I would just on the practical note, again, direct you to the homeschooling resources. It's by no means comprehensive, but it's a start. And if your kids find an area of interest, it's a launching off point that's fairly self-directed. The other thing I would say is that if your kids have certain interest areas and you don't have time to come to the library, call us or email us and we can put together book bags for you to pick up. And if it's not something that we have in the building itself, we have a pretty long reach where we can get it from other libraries in our consortium or interlibrary loan or wider than, you know, just the local area. So we are definitely here to help, and there are resources. And then the other thing I would say, as a parent who, my kids go to public school, but one goes 1 day a week and the other goes 2 days a week, is I think we sort of all need to adapt our expectations of education in school this year. And my kids, the parents, and it's just kind of like, we're all doing the best that we can. So it might not look the same as it has in the past.
Yeah, and I would just add, you know, most topics out there, interest areas, have a museum somewhere on earth. And lots of museums are offering all sorts of augmentative curriculum or online classes or something that you could maybe also access to augment what it is that they're currently studying.
Okay, that's helpful. And I didn't realize that interlibrary loan was back online. That got shut down for a bit.
It did, but we're rolling again.
Now we're back. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of resources online too that can be utilized often for free. You know, there's things like Khan Academy that, you know, they cover so many different topics. It's free, it's pretty comprehensive and well done. And then there are different resources that it's projects. So, you know, they're giving you ideas, like if you're studying ancient Egypt, like here's a whole list of things that, you know, you could throw out there for your kids to do, you know, in studying that topic. So I feel like the internet definitely makes things easier. And right now, I think Janice had a great point with COVID. So many things are available for free virtually right now in a way that, like, you know, even as homeschoolers, I feel like it's Christmas sometimes where it's just like, oh my God, like we can go to this thing, you know, in New Jersey that's happening. And it's free when it would have been hundreds of dollars and, like, you know, an overnight trip to go to this thing. So I think there's, yeah, between the library and the internet, there's stuff to be had. Can we do that, Emily?
I think I have everybody's emails and can just paste the chat to Catherine and Aileen and also to you guys.
Cool.
Sure.
Great. So we were talking about like homeschooling multiple ages of children, I think. And Trish, do you have anything to add to what you had spoken to a little bit earlier about addressing the needs of different ages of kids simultaneously, or?
Sure. I do have something I think I could add. Previously, I had kind of talked about how my kids are only 2 years apart, and just given their learning styles, we do a lot of things together that they're kind of doing the same stuff. But there have been challenging times where, you know, for whatever reason, I'm seeking one-on-one time or they're seeking one-on-one time. And as much as I would like to say it's like all rainbows, right? And one child's off in the corner doing something on their own and the other child is with me, like having this wonderful learning opportunity. It doesn't always look like that, and that other child can get jealous in that moment. And there's these challenges, right? Of like, there's one of me and there's two of them. And I know there are families, there's 3, 4, 5. And so I've tried to learn to be more flexible in what that looks like, and trying to take advantage of more organic or natural times when one-on-one opportunities arise on their own, where one child all of a sudden just gets like absolutely pumped about, you know, being outdoors, playing trucks or, you know, whatever. And I can tell that like he's in it deep and gonna be there for a while. And so I'll take that opportunity to kind of pull my other child aside, and say, hey, this is a really good time for us to do that thing you wanted to do with me, or hey, I think let's try to get this thing done. And yeah, just I'm kind of like really type A, and I have that in me of like wanting everything to go exactly as planned. And something that homeschooling has taught me is to sort of try to let go a little bit and be a little bit more flexible, and, you know, not kick myself too hard when it's not working out exactly as planned, and letting things be a little bit more flexible. And as my children have gotten older, they have really been enjoying audiobooks. And I find that to be a really awesome way to kind of guarantee like, okay, one child's like really going to be invested in this audiobook for a while. And so I can spend that quality time doing this learning with my other child. That's worked out really well too in those moments when we do want to do kind of separate learning. And I'm finding as we are doing more and more separate learning, that what ends up happening sometimes is that they'll start talking about what they're learning about separately, and then the other one will want to learn it too. And then kind of like what Janice was talking, all of a sudden it's like family learning. So I don't know, it is amazing organically how that learning can just kind of weave in and out and through. And it may not be exactly how you imagined it being when you planned it out, but it kind of comes around for full circle eventually.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't know that I really feel like I have anything different to add to what either of you have hit upon. I feel like you covered the bases. Like audiobooks are our best friend here often. And yeah, just trying to hit as many people at once as possible, which isn't always possible, right? When you have a 9th grader and a 1st grader, like my 6-year-old has no interest in high school biology. And my high schooler has very little interest in a lot of the things that, you know, she used to and would never admit she was ever interested in. So yeah, I think just utilizing like and taking advantage of those times when like one child is maybe off at a friend's house or at a program, and which is different this year too. Like I know our life, that used to work really well for us in our family, and this year that's just not happening in the same way. Like my kids aren't going off to stuff necessarily, and when they are, they're going all together. So yeah, I think it's a dance. Like it's a dance that you figure out. Like in our house, we tend to try to have like sort of chiller, quieter time after dinner. Like we all work together to get the chores taken care of, and then it's just a natural like quieter, more relaxed time. And I feel like that's when I see most of the work getting done with my kids. So maybe like having those times where it's just the expectation is that if we're not like engaging in a learning project, like we're just reading quietly by ourselves on the couch or looking at a book or we're drawing at the table. That's definitely something that helps me out when the younger one wants to be interrupting, like me trying to help the older ones, is just having those go-to activities that I know are quiet. I know they really engage her really quickly and well, and that she won't need a whole lot from me during that time. Maybe, so we have like a half an hour left. Yes. Is that correct, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you guys want to go, I know it's a lot on the presenters to do a full hour and a half, but whenever you guys want, you know, when you feel like you've got, you know, covered the things that you wanted to cover and want to open it up to more questions or discussion, you are welcome to do so.
Okay. Well, I'm just kind of looking at my list of topics, and I had sort of touching on the idea of balancing work and homeschooling, which we talked a little bit about I feel like, with Eileen's question, but it might be worth touching on again, like just how to make all those things work, and then navigating the state requirements. which is kind of a big thing. Like how do you like homeschool legally in the state of Vermont? So I'm happy to start off the idea of like the work in homeschool. I do not work full time. I do typically like dabble in different part-time work, which I'm lucky enough to be able to do when I want to, more or less, or have my kids with me for. And so for me, balancing work and homeschooling usually means I'm staying up really late at night, or I'm waking up extremely early in the morning before my children are awake. Or I'm really taking advantage of the days when they are all occupied with something else. Right now, they all do a wilderness program and they're all there the same day of the week. So I'm finding myself with a full day where I just know that I have to really be mindful about maximizing that day's time and being really productive. And yeah, I find it really helpful. Like, this is not necessarily just from a work point of view, but also from like a my needs point of view. Like I appreciate I get up at 5 o'clock almost every morning because I know that if I have 2 solid hours before my kids wake up, that I can sort of start the day feeling like I met my needs. For me, that's just working in my studio. But also just like starting my day not being pummeled with questions from 3 different fronts is really nice. It's nice to just be able to to have your own thoughts and finish them to the end. Yeah, so I mean, that's what I have to say about work. I recognize that that's definitely a different situation than some people find themselves in, where they have like a 9 to 5 structure. We also definitely navigate now my partner working from home, and he's often in meetings where we have to be quiet, or we just have to get out of the house if we can't manage to stay quiet. And that's something that we're all learning together right now, because it's new for us since the pandemic. So, but I think it's a good lesson for kids to learn too. Just it comes with the terrain of being mindful of what your family structure's needs are and being empathetic to what needs to happen in your house. That's all I have.
So I do want to add, Amber, that you've always been a morning person.
They're the night owls.
And so for me, it looks much different. I am not a morning person, but I really enjoy the later evening hours. So my day looks exactly flipped from Amber's, where I look forward to that end of the day time where I get to do the planning, I get to, work on whatever project I have going on, and unwind from my day. So, it can look like whatever you need it to look like, just like homeschooling can. And so for me, it's been in the past part-time work, and I also homestead at a pretty large level, I would say. So for us, the largest thing with homeschooling, where I had to transition from the kind of work where I was used to doing sort of 9 to 3, very structured, very kind of focused, and then transitioning into being home and having a part-time job and also homeschooling and homesteading. I got to the point where I needed to give myself a little bit of forgiveness that it might not look as structured and focused until the end of October, instead of right at the beginning of September. Because a lot of the crops come in and you have to deal with a lot of work with the animals until the end of October. But also knowing that we would be able to cover curriculum really quickly, because we do have so much, once that work is done and set aside, we do have so much structured, focused one-on-one instruction time that we were able to meet all of the curriculum standards that we needed to. So just having some flexibility with, homeschooling for one family is going to look much different than it does for another family, and kind of just being okay with that and understanding that and moving forward with it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot to offer on this particular topic. I don't currently work, a job outside of the home. And I guess I'll just say my balance challenge, because I think that's what it is. Like, this work homeschooling challenge is a balance challenge one. My personal story is that we've been building our house having our house built / building our house for the last 3 years. And that has been our biggest, challenge, where a lot of my energies and efforts were put towards that. And we were kind of changing locations a lot and living in different scenarios and situations, with or without electricity, with or without running water, as we were building our house. And so I think that's the closest thing I can sort of relate right now, to that balance. And any volunteer work that I do or have done, I'll just echo Amber and Janice that what's really worked for me is either waking up earlier or staying up later. I have a hard time really carving out that time during the day. I feel like once we get our day going, it goes more smoothly if I can sort of keep that focus and not need to be pulled away. So I guess that's all I really have to say on that for right now.
I just thought of one more thing, in that although we may focus on certain academics from, say, October to May, there are also aspects of our learning that we continue all through the year. So for example, I had mentioned that country a month thing that we had historically done, or their music lessons or certain things. So that's another aspect of homeschooling that I've really enjoyed, is that, there are those teachable moments that will occur for anyone in June or August, and capitalizing on teachable moments and keeping certain aspects of the curriculum going whilst not in, the school year, is really helpful as well.
Yeah, I never quite know how to answer when people ask me, like, at the beginning of summer, if we homeschool through the summer, because it's such a, it feels like our whole life is just homeschooling. There's not really like a beginning and an end.
Right.
There's just less structure and more structure. Great. So I feel like the last thing maybe to hit on that feels like something that I've definitely chatted with folks about over the last few months, and I'm by no means an expert on, but I have a pretty, good understanding of what is required of homeschoolers by the state of Vermont. And so, homeschoolers are supposed to register with the state once your child is 6. And I actually don't know what the end point is. I was questioning recently if you can stop once they're 16 or not, because that's when they can legally separate from school themselves. So that's like a question for the internet. But what that means is you notify the state, hey, I'm homeschooling like these kids. They would go to this school. They're these ages. And you have to do that by August 1st, July 31st, August 1st. And then I think like there is a method for jumping in late. There are people all the time who decide once they're already in the school year, like, this isn't working for us, we're going to pull out and homeschool. I don't know what that method looks like.
And there's a deadline on that.
There's a deadline on that too.
Yeah, don't quote me, but I think it's like January-ish.
I think you might be right. I know of at least one woman who ran into a lot of trouble because she tried to pull her kids out in like late April at one point, and I think had to pay a lot of money to be enrolled in some kind of other online learning curriculum to stay in compliance with the state. So yeah, there's the notification, and the first 3 years that you're homeschooling, when you notify the state, you have to also tell them what your plan is for the year. And so what I've always found really helpful, it's been a long time since I've had to do this, but what I used to do is look at something like Oak Meadow's website, and I would look at like what Oak Meadow covered in that year, and I would think about the things that I knew my kids were doing. So if they were taking circus classes at NECA, you know, that would be a component that I would add in there. What you submit as a plan to the state at the beginning of the year, you don't necessarily have to follow. Like there's all kinds of things you might put on it that end up not being relevant to your homeschooling journey that year. What I understand to be the case is that the state isn't looking for benchmarks, they're looking for growth. So they're looking at like your child is like they're building on their growth every year. So you have to do that 3 years in a row successfully. And once you succeed the third year, so they accept it and everything goes well for the year, you don't have to do it again until your child's 12. And then each child has to submit one again the year that they're 12. So let's see, for my son, that will be next year. I guess for some kids, that's the year they're entering 6th grade. And for some kids, that's the year they're entering 7th grade. What else? So that's the beginning of the year. The end of the year, so by that August 31st date, when you say like, hey, we're homeschooling, once you've already been homeschooling, when you say, hey, we're homeschooling, you also have to submit the end of year stuff for your children. And so in Vermont, you can either submit a portfolio of work. You can ask a Vermont certified teacher to do an assessment of your child or children, or you can take a test. We've always used a teacher to do an assessment of our children. I find it to be a really gratifying experience to just sit down with somebody at the end of the year and have somebody like echo back like what we've done this year, because in our family, like learning doesn't always look like learning, even though I know they're learning. And so it's nice to have a teacher at the end of the year be able to put the kinds of words and acknowledgement to that, and let you know like, hey, you're actually doing a really awesome job. And yeah, the way that I do that is I personally keep like journals for my kids throughout the year. And so each kid, like once a month, maybe I'll like say, okay, in September, like these are all the things we did this month, or the things they got interested in, or the things they were reading about. I try to jot down titles when I'm able, though I think through libraries, you can get a list, right, of everything you've checked out. Is that possible?
No.
Yeah.
We had a glitch where it got totally deleted, so don't depend on
rely
that.
on it.
But also, actually for Patriot Act reasons, a lot of libraries stopped keeping those records. So
yeah, I know it's something you can opt out of.
Yeah. So it's hit or miss, but we could try.
I know that is one of the things they look for at the end of the year, like our specific titles, maybe that your child has either been read to or read themselves. So those are the kinds of things that I just try to keep notes on every month, like, you know, documentaries we watched or museums we visited, or, you know, what subjects they were really doing a lot of work in. And that makes it easy for me at the end of the year to be able to bring that to whatever teacher we're using who's doing our assessment, because it's really hard to remember like what we did 2 weeks ago, let alone like 8 months ago. So that's what works really well for us. There are a lot of teachers in the area that will do this. I don't know any of them that will do it for free. Like they definitely, you know, they ask a fee for it. The tests you have to pay for. The portfolio is the only free option. And even the test is not comprehensive. Like you still have to, I'm going to let Janice speak about the test because I've never, and actually Trish, you've done the test before too. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
So for me, I actually handle the minimum course of study differently than you do, Amber. I go straight to the state website and I look at their scope and sequence for the curriculum year that my children are in, and I use that and take some points off of that of things that I know that will address that year. So that it's just another way it can be done. And then as far as the end of the year assessment, I have consistently chosen to use an assessment as opposed to keeping a portfolio or going to a teacher for a teacher assessment. And the assessment that I've used, if you went to school, you probably took it yourself. I do the California Achievement Test. Remember? There's a company out of Oregon that sends you out the test and the answer sheets. The children have a week to complete the test, and then I send it back out to them. Amber, you're right. It doesn't cover absolutely everything that the state would require. There are 3 areas that then you need to provide supplementary documentation for. The first of which is literature. So that is where I'm keeping a list of books. Generally, I just have the children, because they're old enough now, give me the list of books. Mary Margaret has decided to keep a journal with hers this year, which I think is great. And so that's the first. The second is physical education. So generally what I've done for that is just sent in a picture of them at rock climbing school or sent in a picture of them on the soccer field. Because for each of these other areas, you just need 2 pieces of documentation. So it's always just been, I've sent in 2 pictures of them cross-country skiing out in the yard, something to that effect. And then the third is the arts. So that, again, has been something pretty easy. I take a picture of them playing the fiddle or up on stage at an event or something like that. And I send that in with the test, and it's been smooth sailing. How about you, Trish?
Yeah, so I guess the 2 years that I submitted my MCOS to start off the year, so that would have been when Charlie was 6 and 7. I didn't do either of what you guys do. I just sort of created something based upon what he was interested in. That year, he couldn't get enough of Farmer Boy, the 3rd book in the Little House on the Prairie series. So literally, I just based all of our learning upon that book for history, for math, for whatever, and that time period really. And yeah, and that was fine for the state, covering all the bases there. And yeah, for those first couple of years, I did do the test like Janice does, and that worked out really great. And then this past year was actually the first year that we did the teacher interview, and that worked out really great too. So I also know that people who do the portfolio, it's not as scary as it sounds. You really only need a couple examples from the year for each subject. And I think, like Amber said, they're really looking for growth. So a math sample from September, a math sample from May, a writing sample from October, a writing sample from April or whatever, just to show that growth. I know that there is that worksheet. None of us have done the portfolio, so we wouldn't have it, but there is a homeschooling mom who shared that worksheet. I'll see if I can find it and maybe add it to your Google Doc, Amber, or email it to Emily to add to the homeschooling resources. Is a really concise sheet that says exactly how many samples you need for the portfolio. So I can find that in my email. I know I recently sent it to somebody, so I have it handy. Anyway, There were a few things I just wanted to add as you guys were talking, that just in terms of organization, I think if you're doing either the portfolio or the teacher interview, you do need to be a little bit more organized in collecting work or knowing where the work is, especially if you're doing, you know, more unschooling or younger children where, you know, my kids never like kept this nice organized binder where everything, I felt like all their stuff was like huge. It's like these big cardboard houses. It's like, I can't like put this in a binder and organize it. And so I am getting more organized these days, and I got some of this from Amber, and some of this is working really well. So I'll just throw out this information too. It's really nice to have like a drawer, like a big drawer, because some work is really big, just to throw all that work, especially some of the artwork stuff. And then it's fun at the end of the year to go through it with your kids and to pick out samples that you would want to, you know, share. Or like the more not technologically savvy way is to just take a picture of everything and then create a folder in your photos for like, hey, this is our learning or per child, however you want to do it. So then you can just go back and it's all documented there on your phone or wherever you keep your photos. That's really simple. I've been having a lot of fun with that. And now that my kids are getting older, I'm having them take the pictures of the work and they love that, and getting to document that. And then the only other thing I'll add, if you do your minimum course of study for your first child 2 years in a row successfully, which means that you submit everything on time and your end of year assessment was submitted on time and complete. Not only do you not have to do a minimum course of study for that child until they're 12, but then you don't have to do a minimum course of study for your further children coming along down the line, because you've sort of just proven that you're a successful homeschooling family. And so that's kind of nice. Given that, I think both Janice and Amber, I guess I didn't elaborate on this as much, even if we're not submitting MCOS's minimum course of studies, like our plan for the year, having those conversations with our children, even if it's not something that we are submitting, is a great foundation to start the year of goal setting. Yeah, I think that's all I had written down. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a good point. I had forgotten to mention that about like subsequent children. Though I recently stumbled across something that gave me pause, which I didn't know this year, is that if there's more than a 5-year gap from the last time you wrote your last MCOS, you do have to do it again. So there is like a time frame on that. Though I think with that 12-year requirement, that unless you have a very widespread between your children, I don't think that would happen very often. I feel like that's everything I thought of. The only thing, I'm going to add this to the doc too, but just like to let people know another, like in the resources sort of like arena, there's a listserv that operates for like the Southern Vermont area for homeschoolers. And so there's people, you know, from, I would say maybe like a 40-mile radius of Putney on that listserv. And it's a great resource for organizing learning groups or organizing field trips or asking questions of the people that are there, looking for resources, trying to sell resources that you're done with. Like you name it, it can be a great way to just sort of connect up with other people who are like in this area homeschooling. There are, I think at last, I'm the moderator right now for the group for the next 6 to 12 months. And I think we have over 100 people on the listserv right now. So it's a good big community.
Cool. Amber, can you add that to your Google Doc?
I am going to add it.
Cool.
Actually, I don't know quite I mean, people would request to be added.
Yeah, like like, is there an email that they could
They could
request?
email me.
Email
Yeah.
you? Okay. If your
Yeah.
contact information is on there and just maybe the name of the listserv, I think that would probably be something a lot of people are interested in.
Okay. I'll add it to the doc. I think that that's all I had on my little cheat sheet notes over here for tonight. But I'm happy to answer any questions that pop up for anybody.
Yeah, did anybody have any questions? I really appreciate everything you guys said. I feel like I learned a ton, and something that I kept thinking of, sort of flashback on the conversation Amber and I were having where we were talking about the anxiety of back to school is you were talking about your youngest daughter and you were like, well, she's going to learn. She's going to learn no matter what. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what people do. Like that's what we're all still in that process as adults. And it's just that there was such a good reminder. And I feel like that just came up again and again that humans are just naturally really motivated to learn, and especially kids. And that I loved what you said, Amber, also about just removing the blocks and facilitating it. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for hosting us. I'm
No,
glad that we could make this happen.
me too. Thank you guys so much. And I am going to end the recording now. Hold on one second.